Hi, this is Professor Tiffany Martin with Medical Microbiology, and we are beginning Chapter 5, which is microbial metabolism. So, metabolism is a big, huge concept. Microbial metabolism is practically the same as eukaryotic cells. So, this is the same thing, cellular respiration, that you have been learning in all your other classes. We teach it in bio, we teach it in nutrition, we teach it in A&P. You get it over and over again because the repetition is good, because the subject is so important, because the subject is so broad. There's so much information. So all of the things I'm saying should be able to lay down with your previous knowledge. You should be able to layer this and add things to it as you're progressing in your career. So I do try to catch for holes in your knowledge at this point. So if something is not making sense, this is the time to really dig in and try to figure it out, because it only gets harder going forward. So let's work through this. The textbook goes into a lot more detail than I think you need to know at this point. And for your career options, you are welcome if you are interested in this and you know that you've got biochemistry in your future and medical school in your future, those types of heavy duty science programs. Then by all means, skim through the rest of this chapter while we're in it, pick up some new information. I know it's summer, so like that's going to happen. But you can look through this. But what I've done is I have designed a fill in the blank kind of a study guide. So have your fill in the blank while you're watching these videos, work through that, and then that will serve you as a pretty good study guide for this chapter. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we need to do is define metabolism. And metabolism is going to be all the chemical reactions in a cell. Everything chemically that is happening in the cell is defined as metabolism. Now, when I say metabolism, and I'm thinking lay people, what you first think of is losing weight, or I wish I have a very slow metabolism and I can't lose weight, or I wish I had the metabolism like I did when I was 16. A 16-year-old boy can eat everything because they have a fast metabolism. So we think a lot of it in terms of that, and it is. We're taking in nutrients, and those nutrients are getting converted into things our body needs, and using that to make ATP, which is a form of energy, and that's what our cells use to do that. So it is about taking in food and then using them for our needs, but it's even more than that. So it's defined as all the chemical reactions in a cell. We can break all of metabolic reactions into two categories: catabolic reactions and anabolic reactions. Catabolic is breaking things down. Catabolism is breaking things down. You bring in nutrients, you eat your banana, it gets broken down in the stomach. Nutrients get brought into the cell, and they're even broken down even further. This is catabolic reactions. Anabolism is building things. I always think of A, anabolic, A, assembly. So anabolic is building things. You take these small building blocks, where you broke these down into its very small building blocks, and then you put them together to make other things. You can also think of it as Legos. Anybody play with Legos as a kid? You build a great structure, and that's great, but then your kid walks in, and then first thing they do is break it all apart. Breaking it all apart is easy. It doesn't require any effort, and in fact, energy is lost in this process. You can release energy in this process, the process of breaking things down. Once you release that energy and you store that energy, you can use that, because assembly, anabolic reactions, are much more difficult. To put things together takes more effort. So energy goes into anabolic reactions, and we're going to build things with that. So we can take smaller building blocks, smaller Legos, and build it into something new for that. Okay, so this is a cycle, and this is how it all goes. For that, when we're talking about producing energy, the best way to do this is by the process of cellular respiration, breaking down glucose into smaller molecules that get used to make ATP. But before we talk about cellular respiration, we need to understand what oxidation and reduction reactions are. Oxidation and reductions are two reactions that happen simultaneously. They always occur together. So if you have something that gets oxidized, you automatically have something to be reduced. They have to occur together in pairs, and it involves transferring electrons from one molecule to another. So you need one cell that has some electrons that it's willing to donate, and then you need another, not a cell, a molecule, a chemical, a molecule. You need another molecule that has a space to that electron. So this is an electron acceptor. Oxidation and reduction happens when this gets transferred. An electron gets transferred from a donor to an acceptor. Now you can see the donor is missing that electron and the acceptor has it. When we talk about donors, this is the process of oxidation, losing an electron, transferring an electron from one molecule to another. This process is called oxidation. It's called oxidation because oxygen is really good at it. Oxygen is really good at donating electrons and accepting electrons. So we refer to this as oxidation. Anytime a molecule gets oxidized, we have to find the acceptor. There is another molecule that got reduced. When a molecule accepts an electron, we refer to that chemical reaction as a reduction, which kind of sounds funny because they accepted an electron. And when I accept something, when I gain something, I think of adding, not reducing. But what got reduced is the electrical charge, right? Electrons have a negative electrical charge. And so the overall charge of this molecule was reduced because it gained an electron, which has a negative charge. So that's how you remember that. This happens a lot in biology. When we see this, it also happens a lot that the electron gets transferred with a hydrogen. So we can see that as we're talking about breaking down glucose and where do these hydrogens go. So we'll be able to follow that as we go along. All right, so oxidation and reduction occurs in pairs. Simultaneously, you always have to have a donor and an acceptor. It's kind of interesting and kind of hard to remember because reduction gains an electron. So I'm going to give you a little mnemonic to remember that. And this one is called oil rig. Oil rig, we live in Houston, so we're very good. We know what oil rigs are. But this is just a quick way to remember this. When you have something that gets oxidized, oxidation involves loss. Oxidation involves loss. That's the oil part of it. And if I go back to the PowerPoint, we see the oxidation portion of this lost an electron. Rig, what does RIG stand for? Reduction involves gain. So reduction involves gain. So that's your little mnemonic to help you remember that. I always need these as I'm going through. Reduction involves gain. Again, when we start moving things around and that electron starts being moved with its hydrogen, and we see a hydrogen showed up, it's kind of hard to remember that reduction is going to add an electron, possibly with its hydrogen. So that's something to help you get involved with that. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to pause this video and we will pick up with the, oh, maybe we should do this first. Let's go through this first. This is in your fill in the blanks, your fill in notes. So I'm going to give you a second to fill it out and then we'll come back. Okay, how did you do? Metabolism, all the chemical reactions, anabolic reactions, building things. When we are trying to build sugar chains, we use monosaccharides as the building blocks to make polysaccharides. Lipids, amino acids build proteins, nucleotides build nucleic acid. And remember, if you build something, it's going to require energy. And this is going to come from ATP. All right, so if I look at this, I've got a simple sugar. I have glucose. It's got 6 carbons, 12 hydrogens, and 6 oxygens. I also have fructose, which actually has the same thing, C6H12O6. They have different names because those molecules, these elements are arranged differently in the molecule, and the molecule has a different shape. But if I want to build a polysaccharide, I can take these 2 monosaccharides and put them together. Now you'll notice when this happens, I have to balance everything that I start with over here has to be accounted for over here. And to put glucose and fructose together, I end up forming sucrose. Sucrose has 12 carbons, which is good, 6 plus 6. But if you look, it only has space for 22 hydrogens when I should have 12 plus 12 is 24, and it only has 11 oxygen. element 6 and 6 should give me 12. So I've got 2 hydrogens and an oxygen left over. What does that make? Water. This process is called dehydration synthesis, removing water. Synthesis, you're building something. You're building something by dehydrating it, by removing water. And this happens a lot in building polysaccharides and building all types of molecules. So dehydration synthesis. Do the next one. All right, how'd you do? Hopefully catabolism is when you're breaking things down, goes back the other way, fatty acids and a glycerol, amino acids, nucleotides. This releases energy and we can use that to make ATP. We added ATP in, and by dehydration synthesis, we can release energy by hydrolysis. So we're using water, the hydro part is for water, to lyse a cell or lyse a molecule, to break something apart. So hydrolysis. There's my sucrose. I add water to it, and that causes the sucrose to break apart, and I can get glucose and fructose. Now, this doesn't happen spontaneously. Actually, it can happen spontaneously. It just doesn't frequently happen. And we need to break things down. We need to take in sugars, sucrose, and break it down into glucose. We need to break glucose down further to make ATP. So in order to make these metabolic reactions happen quickly, we're going to use enzymes. That's my last thing on this one, a specific enzymes. So let's talk about what's involved to break things down. Let's go through a metabolic pathway. So I'm going to stop the video here and we'll pick up with the next one and look at a representative metabolic pathway and how each step is controlled by enzymes.